After looking around the house for where my husband possibly could have left my 6-month-old daughter, I went to see if any of the windows were open. I went upstairs to the veranda of our house, and that's where I noticed a familiar blanket outside. My eyes opened wide, and I rushed to open the window. To my horror, I discovered my daughter, cold and motionless, out on the balcony in the early morning with a cold winter wind blowing. I ran to her and held her cold body against me. Her breathing was shallow, and her eyes seemed vacant. It was as though she couldn't see or feel anything. Even I, an untrained eye, could tell that time was of the essence at this point. Panicking, I ran to the phone to call an ambulance, with my daughter clinging to dear life in my arms. Only one person could have done this, and I would never forgive them. This is the story of how my young daughter went through a near-death experience because of the most ridiculous reasons, and how I was able to get those responsible for her endangerment into a world of misery and shame. My name is Raina, and I'm a 25-year-old housewife. My husband, Benson, better known as Ben, is 26 years old and works as a section manager in a local office. He was my senior at my workplace by 1 year, and I started working for that company a couple of years after graduating high school. I never intended to go to university, and my parents respected my decisions, trusting I would do as much as I possibly could to have a bright future. I worked a couple of different jobs after I graduated, gaining experience. And when I applied for a job here, I absolutely crushed the interview, piquing the professional interest of the department head himself. I was hired, and on my first day of work, Ben was the one who took all the underdogs on a tour of the building facilities and stuff like that. My immediate first impression of Ben was that he seemed to be an excellent leader. He had a loud, commanding voice that demanded attention and respect, and his choice of words showed us his expertise in the job. But he was also kind and funny when need be, and he captivated us underdogs pretty completely during the tour. In terms of looks, he was perhaps a bit too buff for his height, and he had the reddest hair I've ever seen in my life. I immediately took a liking to him, and luckily for me, he became my personal mentor thereafter, teaching me the more distinct details about the job itself and how we were expected to do it. It was strictly professional for perhaps the first 2 weeks, until I invited him to have lunch with me one day. And that's when things snowballed in the best way possible, and before the month was out, we were officially dating. And that was 5 years ago, and it's been 2 years since we were married. Soon after we tied the knot, I found out I was pregnant, so I resigned from my job and became a full-time housewife. However, when I told Ben that I was pregnant, he told me in a tone I did not expect whatsoever. It was a tone of cold skepticism.
Damn. You got pregnant sooner than I thought. Well, sucks to be you, I guess. I don't have anything to do with you and the child. Good luck.
Sucks to be you? It's not my child, Ben. It's ours.
It's a woman's job to raise a child, isn't it? There's nothing much a man can do at all, is there?
I mean, sure, I'm going to be a mother pretty soon, but that's not all there is to parenting. We both need to take responsibility for our child.
I think it ought to be me saying that. You do realize there are people out there who work while raising children on their own, right? You're the one who says you'd rather be a stay-at-home mom with a child on the way. So why don't you at least raise your children on your own, eh?
What an anachronistic person he was. He ought to have been born before 1912.
On the other hand, now I can take paternity leave with impunity.
This idea made him so happy, and he and his friends started planning trips to places and other kinds of leisure activities to go out during vacation. What does he think childcare leave is exactly? I wish I had known this kind of person before I got married, or at least before I got pregnant, but you unfortunately can't turn back time. I was hoping that he would at least be aware of the fact that he was already a father long before the baby was born. That's why I dragged him out to a parent-teacher class at the hospital. I also try to encourage him to check out books on naming babies from the library, to think of baby names together, and to go out with me when we went shopping for baby things. But Ben was always reluctant to go along with all of this.
I knew this was all none of my business. How can I love an unborn baby?
Needless to say, he was still the same as ever. I was so troubled by his behavior that I asked around for advice. A lot of people answered me saying that men usually become fathers after the baby is born. They told me that once he laid eyes on his own child, he'd change. I wondered if that was true, but I put my hope in the story that seeing the baby's face would change him, and I went into labor with this in mind. After my husband did exactly as they predicted, his indifference until then seemed to have been nothing but a bad dream. When he saw the face of our newborn daughter, he was even happier than I was, and lovingly named her Anne, the name we had decided together. He even told me that he was sad to see his daughter leave home for a while, and that he would miss her so much when I told him I wanted to go home for a while after leaving the hospital. He would come to visit us, driving about an hour every single time, every day, to see his daughter's face, even if it was only for a few minutes. However, it was when we returned home after a month's stay, and we began to raise our child together, that things began to change for the worse once again. He went on so many trips with his friends, just as he had originally planned to spend his childcare leave, and never bothered to consider how I was doing with the baby. This isn't to say I needed help, but to be honest, 4 hands are better than 2, and a newborn demands a lot of attention. One can only give so much, and sometimes more is needed. Unfortunately, Ben was just not cooperative in this. On the rare occasions that he was home, he refused to change Anne's diapers, saying they were disgusting. The worst was when she cried, because then he just yelled at me that she was crying. It basically became a situation where he would play with his daughter when he was in a good mood, and to be quite honest, that was pretty uncommon. At first, I thought it was a good thing that I was only taking care of Anne, because he did used to say that taking care of a child is a mother's job. Her cry sometimes woke us both up in the middle of the night, and I would always go to her with a bottle of milk. We eventually decided to sleep in separate bedrooms, per his request, of course. Over time, however, Ben would run out of the house and spend the night in a nearby motel because the sound of her cries in our not-so-big house was quite bothersome to him. For a while, I stayed in my own parents' house, which was probably why he was still so caring of her. He didn't know she would be a bit of trouble during the night. However, my parents-in-law told him several times that I was taking care of his daughter all on her own, so he reluctantly asked me to come home fairly early, after a mere 10 days. In addition to the trips he took with his friends, he started going out to drink more often, staying at friends' houses and coming home in the mornings. I felt that Ben was more the child in need of help than Anne was. Everything he did for quite a while seemed to suggest he was trying to avoid the responsibilities of being the legal guardian of a newborn. Perhaps this could be justified if one considered he was afraid he would be a terrible father if he had to go at childcare. But I really don't think this was the case, considering how much of a capable person he was and how he could naturally take charge of a difficult situation. He was staying away from home because he was simply running away from something that was clearly bigger than him. But that was the beauty of raising children, together as a married couple. Showering the child with love, even during the most desperate, difficult of times, is a blessing not everyone can experience. And the reward of keeping moving forward is that the parents get to see their child grow so fast into a big, strong little angle-biter. But I knew he would never see that side. I had long since given up trying to help him, and I was left to raise our daughter on my own after the birth. When my daughter was 5 months old, Ben came home from work for the first time in a long time. "Aren't you going out for a drink today?" I wondered if his friends couldn't keep up with him because he was already out drinking every day, or if the money just couldn't last any longer. But he didn't seem to want to admit the truth. He started talking to me as if he was trying to cover something up.
Anne's already started weaning, right?
Yep, and she started last month.
Then I guess she won't wake up in the middle of the night anymore to cry, right?
Well, we'll see about that. Lately, her cries in the evening had become more of a serious problem, and she didn't go to sleep for until after a long time. I had been sleeping with her in my arms for a few nights as a strategy, and then put her back in her crib. I tried various things, such as playing her soothing music, which is said to calm babies down when they start crying at night, and taking her outside. But she was still not getting enough sleep, and her crying was getting more and more intense day by day. And when she started crying at night, Ben came out of his room with a very grumpy look on his face.
What the hell? I haven't been home at night for a long time.
Did I wake you up? I'm sorry.
That's not the damn point, woman.
Anne, who had just calmed down, was startled by his angry voice and started crying again. And it just began the endless loop of despair, because then I could see that Ben was getting even more annoyed as well.
Oh, shut the frick up. You're her mother. You frickin' do what you can.
He slammed the bedroom door shut on purpose. The noise made her cry even louder, and I was at my wit's end. Come on, darling, let's go outside for a bit. My daughter clutched my clothes in her tiny hands as I tried to talk to her. I'm the only mother she has. I have to push onward for her sake. Come on, Raina, you can do this. I was afraid that I didn't give myself these mental pep talks, I would quickly get discouraged. But after that day, her crying only got worse. She started waking up every hour and started crying. Ben started coming home every day, but he was on edge perpetually. Anne herself must have sensed the heavy atmosphere caused by his presence, because she never calmed down whenever he was in one of those moods. After a month of this, he had reached his limit.
Oh my freaking god! Enough is enough!
I'm trying, honey, I'm trying.
I'm going insane. Could you please just shut her up already? I'm having insomnia because she cries without thinking about the time.
My husband has a day job, and it must have been hard for him not to sleep during working hours because of his insomnia. While I was thinking about what I could do to solve this problem one day, Ben came home in an unusually good mood and told me that he had seen a psychiatrist that day. He produced what appeared to be a prescription for some medicine and said,
Look, Raina, I finally have sleeping pills, and now I can sleep peacefully.
Hey, that's great.
I can't sleep without meds nowadays, and I think this will solve the problem. You better take care of yourself too, Raina.
I could barely swallow my request to learn if there was such a method. I knew that was going to make him irritated again, and then the endless loop of abysmal despair would just repeat itself. That night, Anne continued to cry all night long. The next morning, Ben woke up, not hiding his frustration. Apparently, the prescribed medication wasn't helping him sleep very well.
It's all her freaking fault.
Ben glared resentfully at my daughter, who was sleeping in my arms. I had my own problems that came from Anne's crying at night, but I was still dealing with a child who had no way of communicating except by crying and whining. I felt sorry about the situation, but I thought I had no choice but to ask Ben to power through with his medication for a while and to do my own research for a solution to her crying at night. After that, the medication, which was our only hope, just didn't work according to plan, and Ben got more and more frustrated. Finally,
It's stressful to even look at your faces.
he wouldn't even eat with us anymore. When he came home, he would go into his room with a lunch he had bought at the supermarket before coming home, ordering me to prevent her from crying tonight of all nights. One day after that, my husband came home and asked me in a panic,
Hey, have you seen the bag that used to be on the small table there?
I think I threw it out at the garbage collection this morning.
You can't even tell the difference between garbage and medicine? You could at least check the contents of the bag, woman.
Apparently, I had thrown away the bag of prescription meds along with the supermarket garbage from the previous night. I'm really sorry.
I've just about had it up to here.
He went into his room making loud noises on purpose. A few hours later, at around 2 a.m., Anne started crying again. I went into her bedroom, myself very frustrated with this new hellish routine. I remembered Ben and what he said and thought I'd take her for a little late-night walk. As I was wrapping her up in her warm blanket so that she wouldn't be cold, Ben trudged out of his room sleepily.
Where are you going?
We're going for a little walk for a change.
Wait a second. It's not safe to go out at this time of night. I'm already awake anyway. I'll take care of her this time. Maybe this is what she needed. Some alone time with her daddy.
With that, he took Anne and left the house. I wonder if Ben would be okay with this, considering he had never babysat Anne before. But she was laughing and squealing as she looked at her father's face, and I saw them both off, hoping that he would give her a little attention. I waited for a while for them to come back home, but before I knew it, I had fallen asleep. Her cries had really taken a toll on my sleep schedule, and getting a good night's sleep had become a Sisyphean task. As I lay down with a warm blanket on the couch, I realized I really needed this, and the slumber was glorious. It was the first quiet night I had in a long time. The next morning, I woke up feeling a little cold. It was a little after 5 o'clock. Oh no, looks like I fell asleep. I wonder if Anne woke up again after her little walk. I peeked into her crib, where she was supposed to be sleeping, but found it empty. I looked in Ben's bedroom to see if she was sleeping with her daddy, but he was the only one in the bed, snoring away. I looked for my daughter in the bed, waking him up in the process. It was unthinkable that Anne, who was not even crawling yet, would go anywhere by herself. After looking around the house for where my husband possibly could have left my 6-month-old daughter, I went to check to see if any of the windows were open. I went upstairs to the veranda of our house, and that's where I noticed a familiar blanket with a pattern of little chicks and eggs outside. It looked exactly like the blanket I had put on Anne the previous night. My eyes opened wide, and I rushed to open the window. To my horror, I discovered Anne herself, cold and motionless, out on the balcony in the early morning with a cold winter wind blowing. I ran to her and held her cold body against me. Her breathing was shallow and her eyes seemed vacant. It was as though she couldn't see or feel anything. Even I, an untrained eye, could tell that time was of the essence at this point. She desperately needed help.
What's with all the noise at this gosh damn hour?
Ben comes out of the bedroom with a carefree yawn. I pushed him out of the way as I clutched my cold daughter and ran to the phone to call an ambulance. While waiting for the ambulance, I wrapped my daughter in another blanket and another. During this time, and also during the time when the ambulance arrived, I did not see Ben at all. At the hospital where she was taken, she was diagnosed with hypothermia. I couldn't stop trembling with fear when the doctor told me that she could have been in real danger if it had been a little colder outside, or if she hadn't been wearing warmer clothes. While the doctors and nurses were treating her, she started having convulsions and began to vomit uncontrollably. I felt terrible and so frustrated that there was nothing I could do to help her. My parents and in-laws rushed to the hospital as soon as I called them. Ben himself, the father of the child, arrived a whole 5 hours later. Anne was immediately rushed to the hospital by ambulance, and I don't know what was keeping him away for so long.
But there was nothing I could do now, was there?
My in-law scolded him, but he just shrugged it off with that carefree statement. Hey, honey, so what happened last night after you went out for a walk with her? Why is it that we only had Anne out on the second floor balcony?
Well, she started crying when we got home from an actually nice walk, so I left her outside alone. I knew it was probably the best solution. She was crying all the time and being so frickin' loud. After all, she's the only reason I can't sleep well at night. I would have given her the pills to put her to sleep if you hadn't thrown them away.
The pills? What pills?
The sleeping pills a psychiatrist prescribed me? I thought they'd make her more docile. I mean, you're responsible for more than half of what happened, and you can't blame me for trying to take a decisive action to solve the problem.
Everyone was absolutely shocked by these words. Everyone stared at him as though they were looking at an alien from outer space.
What the hell were you thinking?
Mr. Davenport, the doctor looking after Anne, yelled.
It's an ironclad rule that when you use sleeping pills on an infant, you do so under the supervision of a trained doctor or nurse. The side effects can even cause the infant to stop breathing. But the ingredients of sleeping pills are the same for adults and children, aren't they? Indeed, they are. And it's precisely because they're the same that they are very dangerous for small children and babies. Sleeping pills are drugs that affect the brain, you see, and if you give them to a child, it will fall asleep and wake up with a pleasant feeling after the effect wears off. However, that's only a story seen in movies and drama.
I was horrified when I heard the doctor's story. If my husband, who had no knowledge of such things, had given the medicine to Anne, she might not have been rushed to the hospital like this. She might have instead been taken to a... Oh, I can't even bear to think about it. It was still such an unpredictable situation, but by some series of miracles and coincidences, Anne was now being looked after by experts. My in-laws were absolutely stunned and speechless at what their son was planning to do. Call the police.
Huh? What are you talking about? The police?
Ben was startled by my words and demanded an answer. What do you mean, huh? Of course I'm frickin' calling the police. What you did is a legitimate crime. My daughter is still in danger.
You're overreacting. I didn't drug her in the end. Now, did I?
Uh-huh. And who, pray tell, threw my daughter out of the house and locked the window when she can't even roll over? Do you have any idea what I've been going through for the past 6 months raising her? Every time you come home from a stupid sleepover somewhere else with your buddies, all you do is yell at her and me. Even when she cried at night, it was because she has no other choice but to cry. She was trying to communicate with us. You always say I'm her mother, but what are you then? You're her father, for frick's sake.
All right. Calm down, Raina. You had to deal with her crying at night too. I understand that.
Don't be frickin' silly. You're not Anne's father anymore. Better yet, you were never her father. She would be better off without a pathetic father like you. I raised her all by myself, and I'm divorcing you. Don't you dare try to come in contact with either one of us anymore. After that, the hospital called the police and the Child Guidance Center. I was questioned about what happened, but Ben immaturely complained that Anne cried so much at night that he couldn't sleep well at all. I realized that my husband had never shown any concern for our daughter, and that from the very beginning he had thought of her as nothing more than a cute little creature to look at. When I asked him again for a divorce, he said he was happy to be free from her hellish cries at night. Our divorce papers were filed and accepted a few days later. Our daughter was admitted to the PICU, the Pediatric Intensive Care Unit, for a while, and she managed to survive her hypothermia. But that doesn't excuse what that bastard did. He is now being sued under alleged charges of abandonment by a person responsible for protection. After she was discharged from the hospital, Anne is now living with me and my parents. The crying at night, that had been bothering me so much, continued, but not for much longer. She got into a better rhythm in life, and she stopped crying as soon as I held her in my arms. Probably because I felt more relaxed than when I was in a hurry to get her to stop crying because of Ben's resent for her. Also, more recently, Anne has started growing teeth and is getting better at crawling every day. And like I said, there are many hardships when it comes to childcare, but the reward is that I get to look forward to each and every one of the instances where I know she's growing up big and strong. Wish us luck.